will be forced to disobey party. Senate presidency aspirants threaten. And then G5 Governor Sean meeting as Atiku laments PDP's lost glory. That continues on page 7. And Oguta Lake Orashi River Project, next game changer. That's credited to the Vice President, and it's on page 7. Oh, just below the nameplate there, 18 days to go. PMB appoints AIG Umar as security advisor. Apparently plenty of appointments still happening in different parts of the country, both at the state and federal level. But that's it from Leadership Friday.
Well, take a look at The Guardian now, and this is what they have on the front page. Underutilization, debts, hobble $4.12 billion rail rehabilitation project. That's a lead story focusing on the Nigeria Railway Corporation. So you might want to take a look at page 6. At the bottom here, they also have something, of course, on the NASS leadership. Aspirants adamant despite APC's promise to revisit zoning. If you look again, you'll also see the story. It's been simmering for a while, but certainly there is a lot to look at in it. Intrigues, protests as immigration boss gets controversial tenure extension. The story is on page 7 of the paper. I think this will be to all those who are interested in what exactly is happening in the Nigeria Immigration Service. Let's leave it there for the Guardian newspapers.
And flip to this Nigeria newspaper. This Nigeria newspaper also follows up on the contest for key positions in the National Assembly. This is how the big story is rendered. Turmoil in APC over 10th NASS leadership. Aggrieved Senate, House of Reps aspirants storm Adamu's office. Vow to work against party if zoning is not revisited. Calm down. We'll look into your issues, party chair assures. Let's go right under that. You see a continuation of reports from the Election Petition Tribunal. Obi's petition unconstitutional. Tinubu must be sworn in. That's ascribed to factional chair of the Labour Party, Apapa. And right under that one, you'll find this. FGA marks 22.44 billion naira to feed 75,507 inmates in 2023. Of course, that formed the beginning of our conversation this morning on the program. And lastly, INEC urges public to scrutinize Imo, Bayelsa, Kogi, Guba candidates list. That is instructive to avoid a flurry of disputes as we find ourselves today after the 2023 presidential elections. Let's leave it there for this Nigeria.
The Vanguard newspaper this morning has this one on its front page. Senate presidency. Northern governors threaten revolt over zoning templates. That's concerning the Senate presidency. Be bold. Reject Tinubu's anointed candidates. Senators tell APC NWC, hold your fire. Will ensure justice. Adamu tells Kalu, Yari, Musa, Yuzunaso, others. North Central APC insists on speakership. Party will revisit zoning formula, according to Umahi. Says one can't be asked to be patriotic if intentionally excluded. All of that you'll find on page 4 of the paper. Presidential poll, quote John's Atiku's petition till May 18. XVP storms court for hearing of his petition against Tinubu. That and a number of other stories you'll find interesting. Mr. and Mrs. Well, yes, Nelta, it's true, it's Friday. Mr. is out of sight, and Mrs. is saying, how do I collect the monthly allowance? Is it according to the rise and fall of the dollar, performance of the stock market, or price of petrol? And Mr. out of sight says, you get it according to how I love you. Mrs. says, fine. Half of your salary will do. That's Vanguard newspaper this morning.
Oh, yeah. Talking about half of your salary to prove that you love her.
That's not a problem for you, is it?
No, it's not a problem. Why half of the salary? Take the whole salary. Well, Daily Trust is next. We have this one, uncertainty over multi-billionaire Abuja Airport one-way project. Criticisms trail fresh 3.4 billion naira consultancy fee Stakeholders flee delay in project execution. 65 billion naira budgeted in 5 years. I mean, the way we call figures in this country, 65 billion naira for runway.
You think everybody's paid in billions, you know?
Honestly. But go to page 4 and you see the details of that. And then just below the nameplate, above that, NASS leadership aspirants not consulted before zoning, Adamu admits. And that's it from Daily Trust.
Take a look at New Telegraph now, the lead story. 10th Senate leadership. Aggrieved APC candidates protest against party Tinubu's consensus. That's what New Telegraph has on its front page. Demand fair play. 2027 polls will depend on how this issue is handled, says Yari. Kalu appeals to party to cede something reasonable to Southeast. Party's chieftain, warns against repeat of 2015 Saraki drama. Group advocates balance in NASS leadership. So a lot of writers to that particular story, which you'll find on pages 2, 4, 3, and 29. They have a plethora of stories. I mean, spoiled for choice this morning, taking a look at New Telegraph. But I'll just quickly read some of those in bold there. At 97, Fashoranti insists on restructuring, says things getting worse, urges incoming government to prioritize unemployment. So that story is also there. And OPEC, Nigeria's economy may recover in coming months. Something to look forward to, at least. Angola tops as African crude oil producer. Food for thought. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
And turn to the Guardian newspaper, and it leads with something entirely different, from all the politicking and the feedback from the courts. This is the big story here. Underutilization, debts hobble $4.12 billion rail rehabilitation project. This is exclusive. You'll find details on page 6. But it would just be interesting to discover all of the details, trailing Nigeria's rail infrastructure, which has been bedeviled by a lot of challenges in recent times, i.e. You could look at, kidnapping on the rail, agitations by workers over, underpayment, welfare, and all of that. So it'll be interesting, to take a second look at that story. Take a look at this one at the bottom strip. Intrigues, protests as immigration boss gets controversial tenure extension. Details are on page 7 of the Guardian newspaper.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, a quick one at the Daily Independent very, very quickly before we go. Nigeria's 77 trillion naira debt, calamity of highest proportion. That's subscribed to Pengasan story. You'll find continue on the inside pages, page 29, I guess. The details of that. It's like the Daily Independent and Guardian are interested more in economic, items on the news, but as their lead story. So that's what you have on the front page of Daily Independent newspaper this morning. Right under that one, you find under the picture, you find PDP receding. Let's regain its prime place, Atiku tells members, insists party won presidential election, will retrieve its mandate. Party says judicial action will determine stability of Nigeria. Yusuf worried Nigeria's debt may rise to 80 trillion naira year-end. That's the story on the front page of the paper this morning, Daily Independent. It is right there. And a number of other stories you'll find quite interesting: the politics, the economy, personal issues, and of course that story that we highlighted is also right above the nameplate. State governments to accommodate their inmates, according to FG, spent 22.44 billion on feeding 75,507 inmates. Question is, if that's for feeding, what's for infrastructure maintenance, and of course salaries. That's the Daily Independent this morning, and a look at the papers. We're back right after now to take on the issues as they come. Do stay with us.
This is a welcome dinner organized by the National Assembly leadership and the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies for senators and honorable members-elect of the 10th National Assembly. Present at the event are principal officers of the 9th National Assembly and the management of the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, amongst others. The Senate President, Ahmed Lawan, gave an account of how the 9th National Assembly performed in the interest of the country. He says a total of 104 bills were forwarded for assent to President Muhammadu Buhari.
As of July 2022, a total of 874 bills were introduced in the Senate, out of which 162 were passed. Remarkably, 104 bills of the 9th Senate have been passed and assented to by President Muhammadu Buhari, making this significantly higher than those of previous assemblies.
The Speaker of the House of Representatives laments the rubber stamp label on the 9th Assembly by some Nigerians. He describes it as a misconception of the relationship with the executive.
This 9th Assembly has often been, unfortunately, criticized and labeled a rubber stamp assembly. I shudder sometimes when I hear it. Sometimes I laugh. Sometimes I just wonder whether people really do follow proceedings of the National Assembly. I want people to do their research. Being rubber stamp has become suddenly a romantic language to use to describe the 9th House of Representatives. I have said earlier in my presentation or in my speech that you are elected not to come head-to-head or conflict with the executive, but to complement the executive for the greater good of the people that we represent.
The Director General of NILS urges the new legislators-elect to get acquainted with legislative proceedings.
I encourage you all, therefore, members-elect, to take full advantage of the experience, faculty, and resource person provided at this induction to prepare themselves for the task ahead.
The induction ceremony for the legislators-elect is designed to last the whole week and will include workshops and other activities to help the lawmakers prepare to serve their constituencies and the nation.
And that's where we'll start. Have a look at what the National Assembly's done in 8 years? The 8th Assembly.
The 9th Assembly.
The 9th Assembly.
Indeed.
What they've done, how they've done it. I mean, if you watch that report, the Speaker of the House of Representatives talks about what they've done and the fact that some people call the 9th Assembly a rubber stamp assembly. And he asked a question. Do people actually follow the processes of the National Assembly? And somebody asked a question. How open are the processes of the National Assembly? Well, we have in the studio a member of the International Public Service Association, Alumni Africa Leadership Forum, Alumni Global Social Change Leadership Institute, New York, Mr. Austin Aigbe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Mr. Aigbe, you heard that report. I mean, the President of the Senate talked about the number of bills that they were able to process that went for assent, and he says that's the highest number by any assembly that has been assented to by the president. And the speaker came up to talk about the fact that a lot of people have called them, the 9th Assembly, a rubber stamp assembly, and he's wondering why that would be, considering all the amount of work they've done. Over 100 bills assented to by the president from this assembly.
Yeah, I mean, he's talking from a point of view. He's the one talking about it. That's not what the citizens can feel. That's not the feedback the citizens will give him. So what the citizens are giving him is that you are a rubber stamp National Assembly. So he needs to change that narrative, not by pushing his own agenda, but to think, why is it? I know that there are platforms where you can easily view what National Assembly is doing, all of their processes are online. But beyond that is when there are some form of agitation. Let me stay with the 5 bills, the 5 gender bills that were dropped by the same National Assembly. Women groups, activists, gender organizations, individuals stormed the National Assembly for about 2 weeks. There was no feedback, no response. They were at the gate, they stampeded the gate of National Assembly, the entrance gate, and the speaker, the same speaker, did not show up. So where's not a feedback mechanism?
Why are you taking that? You know, when it comes to constitutional amendments,
yes,
it's beyond the National Assembly alone. The state assemblies also have their own contributions, and these bills we're going to have to go into. Some of them we're going to have to go into the Constitution, right?
So you need the National Assembly to pass it, and then they send it to the states. At this case, it was dropped at the National Assembly. It hadn't gone to the state, so there's no need to bring in the state at all. It's what you review here, you've passed, agreed upon, you voted. So the National Assembly voted against it, including the bills. One of the bills that the Speaker sponsored, one of the bills that the Deputy Senate President sponsored. So all of those, you would have actually, it's called solidarity. That we are with you. It would have actually showed up at that gate to say, we understand what you feel, but it's beyond me as a speaker, it's beyond me as a member. What we're going to do is we're going to try to have this done, maybe not at the level of constitutional amendment. We can have it just passed as an act, and then we can take it up by the 10th National Assembly. You just encourage them. But for 2 weeks or thereabout, nothing. And at some point, the speaker sent a message out, and people were asking, no, we want the speaker. I mean, that was a point of the highest level of solidarity. But somehow, I think that's where the perception, and you know, people say that perception is reality. There's this huge perception that when it comes to approving executive proposals, you just go once. For example, the recent loan approval, and you're asking, it's almost at the verge of the exit, and suddenly we're approving. So those are kind of the things that people, it's a mindset. And I think the 10th National Assembly can actually learn from what the Speaker has said, that we have done a lot. We've passed huge bills, but the people aren't seeing it.
You know, Austin, with your first response, I'm about to move over to your side and have Nyota question the two of us today. I mean, when you start with a bill as sensitive as the gender bills, you know, talking about how the National Assembly performed, of course, you know, I think that women can agree with you that they certainly have reason to be unhappy with the Ninth Assembly. But let's take a look at a number of other issues. Sadly, I'm on this side, and I think I have to stay here to the end of this program. You know, let's take a look at a number of other issues. I mean, indeed, some people will say that that issue is a matter of, you know, pulling down things that have been in existence for so long. They wanted the National Assembly, the Ninth National Assembly, to be different in terms of its stance. But, you know, if that is still not where we are as a society, the National Assembly can only reflect what its own society thinks, regardless of how women feel. So that is on the one hand. Some people will say it might not exactly depict what they really mean when they talk about the National Assembly being a rubber stamp. Those issues of being a rubber stamp usually come to the fore when we are talking about the executive and the legislature, which you've already pointed to, the fact that when the executive pushes anything, the rigor which we expect to see oftentimes doesn't come through. But there have been other bills. There have been very important bills that, you know, have been lingering for years in the National Assembly. The Petroleum Industry Bill, for instance, the Electoral Act, which, you know, we also, you know, we're looking to see. We had a brand new Electoral Act for these elections, never mind the controversy now that have trailed the elections. There are a number of other important, the CAMA, for instance, as well.
That we disagree with?
Yes, well, but there were disagreements, but there were also landmark improvements. Some of those things did not go through without controversy, but they went through anyway. So when you look at it holistically in some areas versus some other areas, can you really say that the National Assembly hasn't done at least one of the primary duties for which it was elected, which is lawmaking? Wouldn't you score them high in that area?
You've brought a dimension that one will arguably situate. So number one, the National Assembly is not an executive. Their role is lawmaking, and that they've done fantastically well. You've pointed out two bills, arguably, the Electoral Act. even though the Senate president had come out to argue a session of it, that's an aside. Then Kama had been sincerely been on the platform of debate. And right now there's some level of review. I mean, that's another side. But in the Nigerian context, you know how we feel. We don't single out. We put everything in a box and then interrogate. I will argue sincerely that the current National Assembly, as properly constituted by the Senate President Lawal, had mentioned three things. One was that they were going to give the country a new electoral regime. Yes, they did. They were going to pass the petroleum industry bill. They did. They were going to address issues of gender. They did not. So will you say maybe they had 2 over 3? Is that a pass mark? Yes. But gender bills, which you can call as a standalone, is actually very huge because there are 5 bills in one. Electoral Act is 1 bill. Kamal, I think 2, that they broke into 2 and to try to consolidate. But gender bills are 5. And what are these 5 bills? Number 1, you can argue, people argue about the cost of governance with the extra seat for women. But what if you drop that? What about the proposal from the Deputy Senate President for inclusion in appointed positions, the commissioners, the ministers, that they have some level of equality in terms of nomination? What happened to that? Secondly, what happened to provision that political parties should be able to mainstream gender in their processes? So does that also include cost? Is that governance challenge? Or what happened to the fact that as a woman, a Nigerian woman who marries to a foreigner, who decide to ensure that the husband is a Nigerian, and you say no, whereas as a Nigerian man, I can go outside of this country and marry a woman and bring her back and then give her nationality. Is that not injustice? What happened to the fact that as a woman, as a man, I can appear at the immigration office and secure my passport, international passport, whereas as a woman, you need the approval of one man? Is that not injustice? These are the things we are talking about. And it's not because I'm not talking as a man. I'm talking as a development practitioner. I'm thinking that whatever you give to a man, let the same thing be give to the woman. I mean, we're not here to talk about women political participation. We're here to talk about the normal. If the National Assembly, there are ills in the system, what does lawmaking mean? Lawmaking is to correct those ills. Look at the inadequacies. Look at the gap. Why do we have affirmative action, for example, in the United States? In the US, for example, the black Americans will never have had the opportunity of going to Ivy League school, for example, because they are expensive, the quota system is high. But because of affirmative action, you are able to secure admission into those schools. Or let's even come to Nigeria, Unity Schools, for example. Why do we have Section 14, the Federal Character Commission? It's for equity. We must create that equity environment around representation across the board. I don't need to approve for my wife to go and secure international passport. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, well, I want to look at other areas because, we do know that the National Assembly has 3 primary functions. Lawmaking, oversight, and representation. Yeah. So there'll be questions as to whose interests they represented when they did not pass the gender bills.
And just to add, if you go to their offices at the state level, are they truly open? Because that's the office of representation. They are supposed to feed in. Whatever comes to them at national level comes from that organizing point at their constituent. But majority of times, those offices are shut down.
Yeah, but for the people whose offices are open, there'll be questions as to whether we can lump everybody together. Isn't this about how individual representatives or representatives have decided to run their offices? And, isn't it at the end of the day up to the people to decide if you've represented us well or you haven't? I want to queue up on the issue of oversight. This is something that we've spoken about for, years on ending. I want to know if you think that the National Assembly did anything differently this time around. Did we see any remarkable, will I say, moments when we thought, oh, as a result of the oversight of the National Assembly, some things got done better, or that people were held more responsible? We saw what tried to happen with the Niger Delta Development Commission hearings.
My example.
And you know, how you know, things got a bit awry or untidy. How have we really seen, can we really say, in the area of oversight, did they really do anything that was spectacularly different from other assemblies?
We're not trying to speak for the National Assembly. I think, with all due respect to Speaker Femi Bajemi-Mila, it came in with some level of the kind of activist background. If you hear him speak, it commands some very powerful commentaries in a way that maybe from his subconsciousness, he wanted to intervene. Look at the ASU strike. You saw how the House of Representatives pushed the executive. But arguably, will you give it to them? Yes, maybe because of their involvement, there was some level of reduction in terms of the president had to then openly intervene. Ideally, you don't need the president to intervene. Ideally, because you have all of the structure that need to work. But I'll give it, if that's the only thing they deal with ASU, yes, I can give it. But
and there was also the doctors as well.
Yeah, the NMA. But I mean, they just try to come out with a bill that you can't travel out of the country. Even that bill has been maybe died on arrival, as you usually say in the landscape. Sincerely, if you're doing oversight, I mean, there are many other oversight anyway. There are oversight in terms of the Ministry of Finance. We've seen some of those that started that never got concluded. We've seen whether it was concluded. Eventually, no one knows. And you see the National Assembly is inviting NDAs to come report about budgetary provisions or come and report what you want to spend on. Every year, you tend to look at what exactly is the oversight you're doing. And people will say that the oversight means how to collect. You know, when you pull your eye, it means that I'm looking at the loopholes to say, well, you taking this, so you have to, you know, and that's all of those that led to why, which part of the thing I don't agree with National Assembly is that this constituency project. I've argued it time and again. The National Assembly is not an executive, and by the time National Assembly begin to do executive roles, they're taking over the burden, their statutory responsibility. But if they don't do that, the citizens don't see them as performing.
In other words,
so it's a weird situation that they are. But they need to consistently push the agenda of why they are there.
You know, this argument of constituency projects, the National Assembly members, the lawmakers will not be too happy with it, because what you're trying to say is they should not get projects in their constituents. They should not ensure that projects are built in their constituents. So they will not be constituencies.
I have been in the National Assembly. I've argued that matter during the bill. I think it was the same night assembly, I think. The issue is this. Why do we have the local government administration? We've completely eroded the powers of the true two-tier of the Nigerian system.
Okay, just hold on there. My colleagues in Lagos have some questions they want to ask. Guys?
You know, Mr. Igbe, you know, has argued these issues so many times that I don't know, maybe the lawmakers are already used to his jabs at them over this matter. But, you know, there's something that the Speaker said when he was talking earlier about whether or not people understand what the lawmaking process. Yeah, Markwai reeled out the functions of the legislature. But do you think people really understand, perhaps in light of the issues that you're raising about, that Markwai raised with you about constituency projects? Because people really want to see what the lawmakers are doing. So do you think the Nigerian electorate, the Nigerian employers of the legislators, do you think they understand the jobs that they give to these legislators?
Directly to your question, no. People don't know. So as far as people are concerned, we elected you to perform responsibility.
If people do not understand the jobs that they give to the legislators, how then do we as a people measure their KPIs, other than for them to come up with something to do that people can see?
Now you mentioned the key word, KPIs. KPIs, in my philosophical understanding, has gone beyond key performance indicator. KPIs are keep people informed, keep people inspired, keep people involved. And if you check what's happening, the reason why there's that gap, the politicians created a gap. You no longer keep people informed. You are not keeping them inspired. So the only way you do to keep them involved is to bring some project, including commissioning wooden bridge, or some kind of very nonsensical project, all in the name of meeting the needs of the people. What is oversight? Let's stay with oversight. As a legislative activist, because part of my underpinnings is strengthening legislation, is to truly build what they call the federal system. If the National Assembly has a core responsibility of putting Nigeria on the threshold of development and progress. So what is federalism? In this case, as we are in this country, we are running a Central Republic of Nigeria. It is not a Federal Republic of Nigeria. And that is why everything is coming from the central system. What can the National Assembly do? Empower the other arms of government.
Well, Mr. Isaac,
part of what they could sincerely do with the local government administration.
My sincere apologies, Mr. Igbe. We're running out of time, and I think you are raising issues towards the second question that I have for you before Bukola comes in, which is the challenges that the legislature, the National Assembly, has had over years. I mean, we are not talking about state assemblies now because theirs is probably a little more complex than that, but the National Assembly has some critical challenges, one of which is the over-centralization of power that you just mentioned now. So what are some of the other challenges that you think could have debilitated the National Assembly from performing their roles and responsibilities in this ninth assembly?
Why not trying to exonerate them from what they are not doing is that they've got a lot of pressure from the system. I mean, system architecture, as it were, so that if you are not performing, if you are not singing, or if you are not singing the Hallelujah song for those in executive position, you don't earn something you need to go back home with. So everybody coming to Abuja again with this national cake that has consistently been on the discussion arena, that everybody, when you leave your system, you know what Peter Eke referred to in his corruption book, that we've gradually left the primordial culture, and now we are in the civic culture. And what that means is that the moment you leave your constituent and you're not in Abuja, you are seen to be disconnected. And when you're disconnected, everybody wants to see how they can tap into what exists at the national level. And that is what we need to deconstruct. And it will require very strong political will. And I think that the National Assembly must deal with those, because they are the ones who are facing all of these backlashes, and including the one the speaker said, that we don't understand what they are doing. How can we understand when at the point you became a speaker, or I mean, not a speaker now, at the point you were elected to National Assembly, apparently you had just a car, and suddenly you now have a fleet of cars. How will people understand that? So there are challenges, I agree. But we must start from some point. I think the first point to start is the moment the 10th National Assembly resume legislative work, they must deal with this perception and deal with it in a way that they deconstruct it. If they're able to achieve that, if they focus on deconstructing that in the next 4 years, by the next, or maybe in the next 1 year, by the 3 years of their tenure, they could be able to do other things that really put the executive under scrutiny, oversight, representation, and good lawmaking.
I'd like to follow up on part of your commentary earlier on where you submitted just a bit of a fair assessment on the 9th National Assembly. I wonder how fair, that will be if we consider some of the high points, of legislative decisions of the 9th Assembly, and let's just look at some of them. The breach of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, by the executive, for which the Ninth Assembly has done very little. We can also look at the Petroleum Industry Act, for which many have said that, look, nothing has really changed with the new NNPC Limited. We have had the issues of continuous oil theft, which the Assembly has been investigating right before the Ninth Assembly with very little results. So can we really say that, the assessment, for this Ninth Assembly is average or an underperformance?
So, as a participant in this whole architecture, I would argue that whereas they perform credibly well in the kind, like I said just a few minutes ago, 2/3, will you say that's pass mark? I mean, let the people say. But 2/3 in any mathematical solution, that would be arguably a pass mark because they gave themselves the focus. And like I said, the Petroleum Industry Act is just one bill, or maybe I think they tried to break into the governance bill, and I can't remember the other bill now. Then the Electoral Act. Yes, those two went well, but you wanted to change the narrative around representation. But you didn't achieve any of those, not even one of the 5 bills. On one side, some activists will tell you none, they didn't perform anything. But on the other side of folks who have consistently wanted the Industry Act, we tell you for the first time in many years, that the bill continued to repeat itself in the National Assembly. I think far back as the 5th or so Assembly, when we began to see the bill coming up, the National Assembly, yes, passed it. I mean, that's praise for them. Electoral Act, repealed and reenacted. That's awesome. In fact, if I'm to speak from the perspective of the Electoral Act, I was a participant also in the Electoral Act agitation and all of that. What led to what we now call repeal legislation was huge commendation to the National Assembly. Even though we are not where we want to be, but we are not where we used to be. That's huge commendation. But if you then turn it to the other side, particularly with the other narrative, or particularly with what I just said just now about loans, and DMO has just stated that Nigeria is gradually crossing the limit of our borrowing. So, and you're going to ask yourself, why are you approving loan at the verge of the end of a regime? Isn't that a question that anyone cannot answer? I'm sure that our viewers, even all of us on the studio right now, can't fathom that you are approving. Are you putting a burden on the next administration? Was it intentional? Even though it's APC that is handing over to APC, the new administration needed to also start on a clean slate, even though that government is continuum, and people argue that every government of the world borrow money. But what are you borrowing for? Is it improving the livelihood of Nigerians? Agreed, we can see infrastructural development. I've seen good roads by the Buhari administration. I've seen roads that were not built in the last 10 years. They are taking shape. Abuja has become literally a construction site. Everywhere around the city, around the office space here, meaning there are nice roads, I agree. But when the people are hungry, they won't see those development. The human capacity enhancement, human capacity development is sine qua non to every other development that you may want to look at. And one of those is they can argue they've given the executive all the money, all the support. That can be their own trajectory. But from citizen trajectory is that what bills have you passed to improve our livelihood? You've passed the national, the executive came up with the humanitarian commission. And people argue during lockdown, 2020, in the life of this regime, that students at home were fed. And people ask, how were they fed? Were they getting food to them at home? These are some of the narratives that make you think that, where is the real oversight? If oversight is to follow up NDAs and ministries, MDAs, ministries and departments and agencies, what report, what sanction had happened? And you begin to feel as a citizen, as the citizens alike, that, come on, that they were just rubber stamp. They may not be rubber stamp.
Which is the core, really, of the place of the National Assembly. They're elected, you know, to represent the interests of the people. And that's what we're considering, you know, bills that have over, you know, reaching impact on the people. Amakwe raised the point about the oversighting responsibility of the National Assembly, but what we're left with really is scrutiny, you know, like on platforms like this, and what the people say about the impact of the National Assembly on their lives. But really, is it a much of a problem that the Constitution does not provide, make provision for organized scrutiny of the National Assembly going forward? Should we begin to look at a more organized form of scrutinizing the performance of the National Assembly?
No, there are provisions in the National Assembly for recall. I mean, that's part of scrutiny. There are provisions for constituency offices, there are senatorial offices. Those provisions are part of scrutiny. But I just said a few minutes ago that majority of times, those so-called scrutiny platform and avenue are not open. And you know what politicians usually do? They engage in divide and rule, create unnecessary pro, there are anti-views, they create pro-views. And before you know what's happening, there is conflict in the system, and people just go back. Arguably, when you talk about law representation, the representation is that after a quota or sometime when you have recess, and that's why National Assembly does have recess, they go to their constituency and hold meetings with their constituency and give feedback and then hear what the people are saying and then come back to National Assembly. And that's why you see some of the National Assembly members on the floor of the House, they will say, my people have said, whether they truly went to the people or not, but I think that's the way it ought to be. My people have said, it means you are speaking for the people, because all of us in this country cannot converge in a location for representation. We then have to have those level of representative, and that's why any action you take, you need to go back to those who employed you in court, because we've always said that there's an employment and the employers are the citizens. You need to go back to that office and schedule meetings. Now I want to meet with, maybe you can call it town hall meetings. I want to meet with the youth on certain dates. I want to meet with the elderly. I want to meet with women. You have those conversations and you then get feedback. On those feedback, you review and you come back to Abuja and present those feedbacks. But your guess is as good as mine.
You know, awesome. As we wind down, talked about the members of the National Assembly and how ineffective they have been. I mean, the members of the National Assembly. You talked about the fact that they probably didn't do carry out their responsibilities as effectively as they should. But there are those who would also argue that the biggest challenge of the legislator is his constituents, because not only are they not holding him accountable, they are also demanding that he or she takes care of their personal needs, school fees here, accommodation there and all, because we sent you there. It looks as if they sent him there to go and get the money and bring it back to them. So the 9th Assembly is going, the 10th Assembly is coming. What lessons would you advise the 10th Assembly members, the legislators-elect, to draw from these outgoing legislators, and what lessons should the citizens draw from all of this as we go into the 10th Assembly?
Fantastic question. I'll say again, because I think part of my commentaries did align with that earlier. I understand the challenge that the National Assembly members face, and I used Peter Ake's work, the primordial and the civic culture. We can have that conversation at another time. It's a weird situation. In fact, National Assembly, you are not the only one in that shoes. I live in Abuja. I also face that pressure. And I'm sure that you face that pressure living in Abuja. All of us do. It's a mindset. And the way the poverty is rising, the more pressure it puts on people who have. And when you have, you're not afraid of going home, because each time you go home, maybe with your SUV or something that you bought legitimately, people don't care you bought it. They just assume that you've been in Abuja, you've been in Lagos. I mean, you've gotten some, you've gotten privilege to have tapped from the national cake. They don't, and that's a challenge of the primordial culture. And that's what we are saying. The 10th National Assembly had the opportunity to begin to deconstruct. I use the word deconstruct. Deconstructing a narrative, it's not something you just stand and be talking. It has to be use conversation with your constituent. You have to build that bridge with your constituent that I am here, tell me what I need to take back. By the time you are coming back to them and going back and coming back, you are deconstructing some narrative. But when for 4 years there is no conversation, and by the time the 4 years is over, suddenly you remember that you have a constituent, and because you need a vote, that's when you begin to shout, I brought this borehole, I brought this one, I brought that one. When the people actually say that was what they wanted, I mean, we consistently talk about bottom-up development, bottom-up governance, and until that happens, we won't change this narrative, this centrality that is a bane in our national development.
Austin Aigbe is a member of the International Public Service Association, Alumni Africa Leadership Forum, and an Alumni Global Social Change Leadership Institute. Thank you for coming in this morning.
It's my honor.
And thank you for your thoughts. Sunrise will be back in a moment. Please do not go away.
The Duchess International Hospital opened its doors in October 2021. The mission of the hospital is to reverse medical tourism. We take particular care here at the Duchess to bring together a combination of the brightest and the best locally, as well as Nigerians in the diaspora who are interested in returning to do very good work for the benefit of our patients here in this country.
The good thing is that we have all international expertise here, all international facilities here, international people working here. Everything is coming together in a space which was considered not great in terms of the availability of healthcare.
Access Bank, of course, has been able to provide us with a robust range of products and services that has enabled us to deliver that standard and quality of healthcare that is integral to our mission as an organization.
Right Honorable Ahmed Idris Wasi, CEO and Deputy Speaker, House of Representatives and Member-elect, 10th Assembly cordially invite all members-elect and other stakeholders to the official declaration for speakership and unveiling of 16 years legislative track record and 10th Assembly agenda. Date, Friday 12th May 2023. Venue, Congress Hall, Transcorp Hilton Hotel, Abuja. Time, 4 p.m. prompt. Announcer, Honorable Femi Bamishile Richard, Director General, Wasi Speakership Campaign.
New beginnings are always colorful. When we celebrate the start of life's journey, we marry in colors. With our proudly Nigerian Dulux paints, now available in any color. Express your world however you want it. Visit a Dulux Color Center to get any color instantly. Dulux, let's go.
for staying with us. A few days ago, Governor Nasir El-Rufai, Governor Charles Shiludo, and former CBN Governor Lamido Sanusi insisted on the fuel subsidy removal and saying it has negatively impacted Nigeria's economy. Of course, some of their comments you saw in the slides that we opened with. So this morning, let's take a look at this conversation again as we anticipate what the next administration will do in that regard. Every presidential candidate, contender in the build-up to the 2023 election said the fuel subsidy is a gunner. What are the pros, cons, implications, complications? Let's have some conversation this morning with Joe Akwe, who is a petroleum engineer. He's a partner, Zera Advisory and Consulting, former chairman, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Nigerian Council. He's also a former SA to the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum. He joins us virtually this morning. Thank you, Mr. Akwe, for joining us this morning. Well, there are those who will be wondering, okay, we've been talking about this for eons. I'm wondering, for how long are we going to talk about this before we actually do something about it? It led to an unrest of sorts in 2012, and even before that, it was a significant issue. 2012 to now, that's 13 years. What exactly are we up against, and why is it so difficult?
Well, good morning, and good morning to the viewers. Sadly, we just keep talking about it. And the reason it's difficult is that it's become not just an economic or policy decision, it's actually political as well. So it's made it very difficult for regime after regime to act in the proper way. So I think the issues given up the peculiar nature of the industry, the issues have kind of dragged for so long. And I remember some years back, somebody said, well, we're going to have to do it someday. We kept kicking the can down the road. But I think we've come to the end somehow, because there are several components to this. One is, are we doing the right thing? So if the answer is yes or no, we'll debate that, we'll argue about it. But when it comes to can we sustain it in the long run, I think we've come to the point where it is no longer sustainable. So, and something has to happen.
Is there a template in the world, Mr. Nwakwe? I mean, from the levels at which you have operated, we'll probably be able to tell whether there is such a template anywhere in the world of subsidy on petroleum or products for citizens of any particular country, how it is managed, and how it seems, on the one hand, there are people calling it a scam. On the other hand, there are people who are saying it is there, but it is milking us dry. Exactly what is the position from what you can see?
Well, globally, a lot of countries have subsidies on petroleum products. So Nigeria was not a unique case. Up till tomorrow, the Saudis don't pay competitive price for petroleum. A few countries have migrated from a subsidy regime to a market-driven pricing regime. I mean, Ghana right here has gone through that pain in the not too distant past. So it's, and Mexico, a few other countries have transitioned. So it's not, it has to do with the ability of the state to pay. That's one, and whether or not it is the right way to allocate resources. So you have to, it is very contextual. So every situation is unique in very many ways. So I think that when people make the comparison that, for instance, the Gulf states have subsidies and they would like to keep it here, you have to ask them, what are the resources available to sustain it? The Gulf states are oil-rich states. Nigeria is not an oil-rich state by any stretch. So we really need to make apples for apples comparison as far as this goes.
Just 1 second. You said Nigeria is not an oil-rich state. What do you mean by that?
Well, Nigeria is not an oil-rich state. Okay, so let's look at the numbers. we produce, on a good day, I mean, a couple of years ago, we do maybe 2.2, 2.3 million barrels of oil for 200 million people. So you can look at the production per capita. Take that compared to Saudi, 10 million barrels for far less than 30 million people. So you can see that you have to look at, okay, if we were to share this production per head, how many barrels will you end up with? And how many barrels will I end up with? So that's how you want to look at it. I think on this platform, I had said some years back that if you look at what we spent per head, you look at our budget in the last 10 years, we spend less than 150 cents per head per year. So that's poverty. You can't look at that and say you're oil rich. We're not rich by any stretch. So I think that the comparison we make with the Gulf states that are oil rich is not appropriate.
You asked a very important question just moments ago. You said, can we sustain fuel subsidy in the long run? And I just want us to begin to look at the implications of our inability to sustain it, or rather the inability of the incoming government to remove subsidy. What would you consider to be the long-term implications? Because already the federal government is borrowing to fund subsidy, and there's another borrowing that may have been secured, as an alternative to the removal of subsidy. So there is borrowing on borrowing. So what are the long-term implications of the lack of political will to eventually remove subsidy?
That's a very good point you made. So let's look at last year. The total federal government FGN revenues were approximately 7 trillion. I understand we spent 6-point-something trillion on subsidies. So technically, whatever the government earned was spent on subsidies. Now, you haven't talked about debt servicing. You haven't talked about running the government itself. So the implication is that we have to borrow the difference. So whether it was 12 trillion we spent last year, that difference, 5 trillion thereabout, was borrowed. And it means you have to keep servicing it year after year. It means that we are piling up liabilities for the generation that is coming behind us. That's what that will mean. To what extent can we continue to do that? I think we are coming to the end of the road as well. If we continue on this path, at some point, not too far from now, it will even be difficult to raise debt for the country. I think we are running into the wire, if you ask me. So I think we have to make a call at some point and say, okay, what exactly is this intended to accomplish? I am not sure. And I say this all the time. There's nothing wrong with subsidies. Okay? Subsidies are not bad in themselves. However, every subsidy regime has to be properly designed, targeted, and the outcome needs to be very well established and measured. So I don't know what went into this, how we ended up here. It's historical, I imagine, but we need to look at it again. And if we decide as a nation to subsidize, maybe a different model will be appropriate. What we've done in the last couple of years just doesn't work. There are a couple of issues that people raise about this, and one is that nobody understands what went into the design. What are we trying to accomplish? Like I said, subsidies are good as far as they are designed to accomplish an economic objective. So people say, oh, you subsidize productive activities, not consumption. So we need to go back to the basics. Is it transparent enough? So even if we decided to subsidize petrol, is the model we have used transparent enough? Does the average man on the street have confidence in that to deliver on the objectives, whatever that may be? So, and then of course, in the long run, is it sustainable? So these are all criteria you have to look at. I think that what we have today, we inherited it. I'm not sure, and I haven't seen anything that says that it was properly designed. And I don't even know what it is intended to accomplish. So we need to go back to the basis and say, okay, if this is the case, what do we want to achieve with this? And should we go this route, or should we just simply exit? And I think if you look at the law of the land today, which is the Petroleum Industry Act, Section 205, clearly says that we need to migrate to a market-driven model, a very competitive market for pricing of petroleum products. So essentially, the subsidy regime is, if you ask me, is illegal as far as the...
Indeed, the law is clear on it. But then again, let's begin to look at the body language of the outgoing administrations, such that perhaps we can glean something from it and speak of what is to come. You know, in a few months back, the Minister of Finance said that you know, it's realistic to begin to remove subsidy from about April. You know, gradual removal of subsidies such that you don't do it in one fell swoop. And then some weeks back, government says again that, you know, the subsidy has been suspended, but that has been clarified to mean that, you know, they're expanding the committee. Is this, you know, significant of what is to come? What does this tell you about the decision that the incoming administration will take as far as the removal of subsidy?
Okay, I think what it tells me is this. It tells me that nobody is doing the work that needs to be done. If we need to exit subsidy, it's not a light switch. You don't just wake up and put it off, right? There's work. There's pre-work. There are things that has to happen. So it's a journey, like I will imagine. So if we keep talking about, oh, we will remove it and we'll put a date, right? My sense is that there are three key issues that needs to be done before you can say, oh, we've exited the regime. One is you need to diversify supply. Right now, we have a single supplier in the market. That you cannot exit subsidies if that's the case, because that would mean that you don't have a liberalized market. You don't have a competitive market. One supplier, okay. So that has to happen. So we need to bring in as many players as possible into that space. Currently, they're all retailing, they're all taking products from NNPC and retail. So we need to get them into the supply side. That's one. Two, we need to think about stakeholder management. We need to bring in all the critical stakeholders and, you know, put a plan together, get them to buy into it. That I haven't seen happen, right? So we must all pull in the same direction. You know, this will fail, and I'm very worried about something. It seems like the government, everything I've had, they are being driven by the lack of sustainability. So policy cannot be driven by poverty. We are reacting, right? We are basically saying, oh, we need to get up because we can't pay.
Mr. Wakwe, to ask the question in a simpler form, do you think the incoming administration will have the political will, the courage to take the tough decision of removing fuel subsidy?
I hope so. I will say that I hope so. And there are two times that a government should do this. One is when oil price is low, which is maybe $40. If you're below $40, essentially at current price, there's no subsidy. So that's one time to take that decision. The other one is when you have a new government in place that has goodwill, political goodwill, and people trust, then you can take that decision. So those are the two times I think you can do it with minimal pain. But, you know, I hope they will be able to do it.
And you talked about the liabilities that that government will be leaving behind if it's unable to summon the courage to remove subsidy, which brings me to the next point. What options are there available to Labour? What agenda should Labour be pushing for, you know, for the incoming administration on this thorny fuel subsidy matter?
Yes, I think Labour, they are Nigerians, right? So we are all Nigerians. So I will expect that they will sit down, government, and you know, fashion out a program that will not just say, oh, we're taking this away, but, you know, there has to be some social intervention, palliatives, if you will, whatever you call it. I hope it won't be cash-based. I hope it will be things that will actually impact the targeted poor man, in quotes, you know. So it's I hope they will engage. My expectation is that Labour will engage and raise their issues and not, grandstanding doesn't help. We are in a very bad place now. I think every well-meaning Nigerian, whether in Labour or out of Labour, needs to sit down and work out a plan with government. That's the work I keep saying that hasn't been done. That needs to happen. So announcing dates, oh, we're going to exit on these dates, and it's unhelpful. I think we need to sit down and work out a plan that every stakeholder will buy into, so that we do not have a failed deregulation program. Okay, I am very worried that the way we are going about it, look, we are being reactive, right, and spontaneous. So we need to sit back. It has to be deliberate. It has to be pre-planned. You need to get stakeholder buy-in and engagement before we finally hit raise the tape. I think it's important that we do that.
Well, Mr. Wakwe, the largest stakeholders are Nigerians. The 200 million less the critical stakeholders, the oil workers, the civil servants, and the Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources and all. Those are the critical stakeholders. And as you said, engagement. I think perhaps that's the #1 challenge here. What Nigerians have been told over time, at some point we were told subsidy is gone forever, and next thing we hear, subsidy is back, and then that's on the one hand. The other hand is Nigerians are saying, look, you want to remove fuel subsidy? That's fine. You talked about minimal pain. One of the ways in which this pain will be minimal is for the refineries to work. I don't know how many times I've heard turnaround maintenance since 1999. I don't think the thing has turned anywhere at all. I mean, that's just me talking. So what should we be telling Nigerians that will persuade them enough to say, this is the way to go, let's bite the bullet once and for all, feel the pain, know how long it'll last, and then we can sing Uhuru not too long from now? What should we be telling the people?
Okay, yeah, like I said, I think if I were to advise, I would say, well, put together a plan, bring in all the critical stakeholders, walk them through the plan, get their buy-in, and then you can go public and say, well, this is what we have. It's going to be this way, that way, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to do A, B, C, D within these time frames. Nigerians are here. We own the country, so everybody should. There has to be some pain. And the good news, though, is that I hear 22nd, Dangote refinery will be commissioned. So it means that in not too distant from, we will start having locally refined products in the market. So that's very good. I understand the progress Port Harcourt rehabilitation, and hopefully before the year runs out, I hear we might start producing from there as well. So those will all come in to help mitigate minimize the pain, if I may use that word. But let's be clear on what domestic refining does not take away completely the pain. So even if you were 100% self-sufficient, if you're going to pull the plug, there will be price increases. I mean, that's the reality. So there will be some pain, but it will certainly help that the bulk of our consumption is produced locally. It will certainly help.
Well,
so that's what I would say. But again, what I should tell Nigerians is, bring all the facts, put it all on the table. Nigerians are reasonable people. I think they will see through it and understand why this has to happen.
Well, the palliatives you hinted at right now is perhaps what informed the proposed $800 million World Bank loan that this administration is asking for, which of course cannot be completed until this administration exits and the next one inherits it and all of that. So what's your take on that proposition for an $800 million palliative loan that will, as some people have said, only increase the debt burden that is, according to the Debt Management Office, is already overstretched? So, palliatives, $800 million World Bank loan for 5,000 50 million, beg your pardon, 50 million Nigerians, 5,000 every day for 6 months. What's your take?
Well, if I tell you I understand what that is, I am lying to you. I do not see how borrowing more money helps. Neither do I think that the state has the capacity to intervene in that manner. We've had series of interventions where the state directly give conditional cash transfer schemes and all that. Personally, I don't think that we're in a place where we can. I don't trust that the Nigerian state can deliver on those. So when we come up with stuff like that, I'm a bit wary. I think that I won't borrow at this point, personally. If I was making the call, I really don't see until you have a plan. I don't know what it's the plan that will determine what you do next. So if we don't have a plan,
can the plan include taking a loan? Do you think it's reasonable for the plan to include taking a loan?
It would depend on what you're trying to do. For instance, if you sit down and they say, oh, we need Mambila done, because part of the challenge you have is energy supply, right? Energy supply includes electricity, it includes fuels, okay? If, for instance, you say, oh, I want to roll out auto gas, and we don't have the resources, and you say you're going to borrow to roll out auto gas to minimize the pain that this location, then I can understand it, okay? If you say, I'm going to invest it to make sure that in 2-3 years, Mambila will start producing 3,000 megawatts or whatever it is, I will understand it. If that is part of what has been agreed to enable this transition to happen. But I wouldn't support anything that says, oh, I'm going to borrow money to share, because I just don't trust the Nigerian state to be able to share anything.
So how will Nigerians trust the Nigerian state, whatever plan they come up with? Because as you know, you've been in government before, whatever plan it is, it will cost money. Why should Nigerians trust any plan that will come from government they have not trusted for decades?
Yeah, and that's a valid point. So there is a place for building trust, right? It's something that has to happen. I mean, why have a leadership that you don't trust? So these are issues that I'm not sure. It's just that we are pressed for time. I'm not sure what the trajectory will be. But I think that if government comes out and says, okay, this is the plan, this is what we're going to do, and people see that they are very serious about doing it. I mean, we've gone through that route before. People will come around eventually to the idea that yes, we need to do this, not just for ourselves, but for the future of our country and generation yet to come. We cannot continue. I mean, I don't imagine that it's a responsible thing for this generation to rack up 77 trillion in debt and hope that our children will be happy with us.
Well, talk about inheritance. Inheritance assets and possibly sometimes some liabilities, and unfortunately that's what this seems to be looking like. Mr. John Wakwe, thank you so much for your time this morning. As a petroleum engineer, partner, Zera Advisory and Consulting, former chairman, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Nigerian Council, and former SA to the Minister of State for Petroleum in Lagos. Thank you again for your time, and thank you so much. I don't know what to say. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day.
Okay. Well, we're talking about building trust. A whole new set of governors coming on board from May 29. Agenda, what to do, what to expect, that and a little more when we return after this break.
Some identities cannot be mistaken, like your business name and your account name. Your business name, if it be shoe place, then the account now, color can remove. If I see him, I block him straight. You don't understand? Don't confuse your customers. Sign up for a Money Point business account today and get a business account in your business name in minutes from your shop banker. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Whatever it takes to make sure you have a business account opened in your business name, we'll do it as your sure banker. Open a bank account in your business name with MoneyPoint.
Nigeria has limitless potential in every sector. A people of boundless creativity and zest for life. The hand on the plow is pushing towards domestic competence and self-sufficiency. Unfortunately, Nigeria spends billions of dollars on the importation of foreign goods and services annually. By doing so, we give away our jobs, local and foreign direct investments, which puts so much pressure on our currency. This trend can be reversed if we all consume what we produce. We need to grow what we eat, savor what we rear, and take pride in made in Nigeria products and services. This will boost our economy and mitigate the effect of global economic distress. Patronize Nigerian products and services to grow our economy. This campaign for the patronage of Made in Nigeria products and services is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment.
And there we go. So it's a couple of days to the end of this administration, and about 28 governorship candidates in the 2023 elections are going to be sworn in
Yeah.
in a couple of days, a couple of weeks rather. Of those 28, 18 of them are first-time governors, as in they've never tasted that office, and they're coming in. What are they going to meet on ground? What are they going to do when they come in? Well, who's preparing them? Are they even prepared for what they are coming in there to do? Well, so before they take their oath of office, I think some people are looking at how to coach them, guide them, advise them. Well, anyway, Head of Media and Public Affairs, Nigeria Governors Forum Secretariat, Abdul Razak Bello Barkindo is in our studio, and he'll tell us what it's like working. Let me start off real quick and ask you this question. You're not a governor, but you have to deal with 36 human beings who are considered first citizens in their state. What's it like working with them?
Well, hectic, I must say, because the chairman is only first among equals. And each governor would obviously have requests that would require the secretariat working honestly and assiduously to ensure that that request is, taken up and finished clinically by the secretariat, which, the leadership has been able to accomplish creditably too. And
when people hear of the Governors Forum, it's assumed that what they do, they gather once in a while to have conversations. The secretariat being there will mean they document these conversations. Are there things like peer review sessions where they hold themselves accountable, where they say, hey, you haven't built that road, the other one you started, you're not done with it, you're not governing your people? Do they do that amongst themselves?
First of all, I must clear this impression that a lot of people have about the Nigeria Governors Forum. I remember when Chamberlain came to our office the first time, he said, oh, Barkindo, I thought you guys lived in a two-bedroom house. No, we're an institution. We're a policy hub. We do not have the right or mandate to hold governors accountable because they are our principals. They put us there.
Do they hold themselves accountable, not the...
I think that would be an unfair shot because they are not supposed to hold themselves accountable. The people are supposed to hold them accountable. Or on the other hand, the legislature, which is the other pillar of our democratic process, should hold them accountable. But, there is a certain absence here and there. But for the governors, I think together, for the mere fact that they have, jettisoned, their partisanship and come in under one forum as a group, they've been able to, if not hold each other accountable, at least share experiences and see how they can help one another move their states forward. And I think that's a good thing for them.
Okay, so now you have 28 governors that are going to be coming into the next, by May 29, 18 of them greenhorns. What's the plan?
This is how I see it. There is no greenhorn coming into governance in Nigeria. I would say most of the governors are the best of us in our societies. We have legal luminaries, we have medical doctors, we have engineers, we have accomplished businessmen in office. The thing is, campaign is different from governance, and that's why we're having an induction for all of them. You need to be able to disrobe yourself of that toga of campaigning and getting people to, and begin to see governance as an opportunity to make a mark, help your people, and ensure that history sees you in a positive light. Unfortunately, there are some, for me, I wouldn't pinpoint who or who is where. But I know that a lot of governors are doing their best, putting in their best, and the 18 that are coming are probably going to do much better than the previous ones, because they say experience is the best teacher. If you had been understudying your friend or whoever assisted you to become a governor, you would have known where the loopholes or where the shoe pinches. And you should be able to, tread very, very carefully to move things forward. But of course, there are people who just assume that they can be governor for being governor's sake, and their footprints show. But most of them are doing well, I would think.
Well, let me take it up from, sorry, would you kindly move the glass forward? I'm just, thank you. Okay. Been a bit worried about it. I am looking at the first 100 days. I do know that oftentimes there is usually some emphasis on the first 100 days, something that we've now copied from the American system of government in terms of how they hold their own leaders accountable. What are some of the things that you think we should be seeing in somebody, especially a governor, who is serious? I think we have lots of proverbs that says things like morning tells the day, you know how somebody will do from this. Lots of proverbs, buttressing the fact that you would immediately tell when somebody means business in his or her state. Well, it's only his state, there's no her, sadly. What are some of the things, what are some of the markers that you're looking to impress upon the governors as they come in for some of them for their first term, or even some of them to say, oh, this is some of the areas where you possibly did not do well, or some of the mistakes you might, I don't know if that happens though. Do you do that?
Yes, it does.
Mistakes that people have made and maybe they could look to correct. Do they ever acknowledge that there have been mistakes?
Yes, they do. And I think whoever created the first 100 days in office would have done democracy a big favor, because it's one landmark that all politicians look forward to. And by the first 100 days, each state or each governor would be glad to say, this is where I am. But for me, or for the Nigeria Governors Forum as a platform, you know immediately if in the first 100 days the governor has been able to, assemble a team, because that's one of the themes also at the convention, the induction. One of them is, you would maybe agree with me that Nasir El-Rufai, the governor of Kaduna State, has been able to assemble his kind of team that has been able to work with him. And if you go to Kaduna today, you would see that there is a great transformation from the old Kaduna that he used to be into the new one that he's going to leave behind. And that is because, if you are able to put together the right team, your movement would be seamless. People will begin to acknowledge that, what you're doing is right. You would have seen in the, previous administrations where it took time to assemble a cabinet, and everybody was thinking, oh, the cabinet was going to come from outer space. And by the time the cabinet was put together in 2015, you could see that a lot of people despaired. A lot of people thought, what was on ground was not what they expected. So the expectations for first 100 days is justified, I would say. And for most people, it is the first, handing over, mark that you need to exhibit what you can do And usually, you know, they seek advice or begin to seek advice when things begin to go wrong, or, you know, some are applauded when things are right. So I think the onus of looking at governors is not on governors themselves, it's not on the forum, the Nigeria Governors Forum, but I think it's specifically on the people. I've always said Nigerians must begin to reclaim their country. We must begin to ask questions about what happens, because people are becoming more and more aware today. And when policies go wrong, they immediately, you know, where to check.
Interestingly, you're not inducting the Nigerian people. It is the governors you've chosen to induct. And I'm sure there's reason for that. Hopefully, part of the things you're also looking to do is perhaps imbue capacity. Part of what I'm sure the Nigeria Governors Forum exists for is to also help strengthen capacity in the areas where they're lacking. So what are some of the areas that over time you've noticed that, you know, quite a number of states struggle and their governors as well, and some of the areas where you can say that the Nigeria Governors Forum has been able to help strengthen capacity, and perhaps we'll be looking forward to engaging more in those areas than it's previously done?
Yes, I think, Maope, you've hit on the word. It's capacity. A lot of people think that when governors or governments, you know, bring infrastructure, roads, you know, housing, water and electricity, they are doing well. I think that is statutory. One of the areas where I think most governors do not see that they need to improve is in human capital development. We have an office, a section of our office, which is the human capital development part of this government. And it has had problems even getting the attention of the people in leadership. That's probably because that does not, you know, actually function in Naira and Kobo. A lot of people do not see the need. And that's why I would say maybe the last election had the kind of turmoil it did. Because a lot of people have become so aware of their environment and their politics that they react to things in a very constructive and forceful way. And unless, you know, the people coming in begin to look at this country as a country of humans, not a country of vehicles and utilities, I think the better for us.
But would that be easy to do if they do not have a picture of where they're going to, like vision? Writing on the back of that question about capacity, in that induction, would there be room to say, fine-tune their vision or help them to fine-tune whatever picture they have or where they want to take their states to? And how would that even work out?
That's where our state's peer review mechanism becomes relevant. When governors come together and begin to see that one governor is doing well, one of our duties is to, you know, ask him to replicate what has happened, especially if they come from the same geopolitical zone, which means the social and economic, you know, circumstances would also respond equally. On the other hand, there are people who come with their own vision of what their people think they need to do and things like that. And these ones, you know, would have to be left to do the things that they think are right. Because as principals, we don't force you to do what we recommend. We only advise. Our role is advisory. And if you decide not to take those advices, who are we to say, you know, you must? But I'm happy to say that, you know, the NGF has been able to, you know, galvanize that kind of attention that not only governors, in the last 1 year or the last 2 years, I would say more than 50 serious, responsible institutions of this country have come to the Governors Forum to say, please, help us with this or help us with that. And that is because they have seen the impact that we have been making on governors themselves. And the governors have been able to cooperate and, you know, assimilate whatever advices we give, which means we are all thinking in the same, you know, way. And that's, for me, is progress.
You know, staying on that particular matter of peer review and development, what many Nigerians and indeed residents of different states will want to see is beyond the road constructions. Yet the roads are good, providing the different infrastructure is good, but they'll want to see a governor or first citizen who is relating and communicating with them, connecting with them. I'm not lived too long on this earth, but I know that there was a time in this country where the different regions would look at each other and say, okay, in the southeast, this is happening. We can do this here. We can. How much of that are we likely to see going from the things you said are going to happen during this inauguration? Would we see more of this happening? Induction. Would we see more of this coming together? There was a time Lagos and Kebbi came together to farm rice. Would we see, especially seeing that now the Constitution has been amended, there's room for states to generate and distribute said electricity. There's also the part of railway. You think the governors, these incoming governors, will be thinking in that direction, and how would the forum help them to further their thinking in that direction?
Yes, I think picking from, what I said only a few minutes ago, the quality of governance has been growing, and the vision of the people who are becoming governors have been expanding. I think, going by what you think, if the governors are going to come together and do something good, I think it's a social responsibility, and now it is becoming a social force. I don't think anybody wants to be a governor just for being a governor, because the pressure is going. If you asked me, I would say when people become governors, they should not have friends, because maybe their friends are the kind of people who influence them to do negative things, because people come with good intentions for their people. And you would notice that people who are friends with people in government probably become enriched, even if the governor is not enriched by himself. And the general population now begins to see closeness to people in power as an advantage, which shouldn't be the case. But I think by the force of the social movement that we have in this country today, as we see, it's not likely that anybody would sit in that office and not want to make an impact one way or another on his people, on the, demands or facilities that they need, on the resources of or on even revenue generation, which is, also one of the things that the NGF helps them to do. So by and by, I think a lot of sensible and forward-looking people are coming into governance, and I've checked the, bios of all the 18 that are coming into governance newly. And I see that also from the choice of people we are asking to come and speak to them, there is a kind of desire, to make governance, move in the right direction in this country. And that is for all of us, not just the governors.
What are you hoping this induction will achieve? I know you've spoken about getting rid of the campaign mindset to, looking at governance. What are some of the things that the NGF is hoping that this will achieve?
The first thing is that the NGF provides a platform. And that platform also revolves around its convening power. And usually whenever governors come and see how the debates, because the debates have also improved, I would say geometrically, because today nobody comes to the NGF to discuss his party or, what is happening in, they lose all forms of partisanship. That alone means that they want to learn from each other. I agree that there are sometimes very tempestuous arguments between governors or between, well, if you ask me, the manifestos of both parties are the same. So they seem to pursue the same agenda.
I'm sure that the parties would disagree with you.
Of course they would, but I'm not a politician, But generally, if you look at the kind of debates they have, they debate only things that are meaningful and would, further the interests of the people more than, other primordial things that come up. So I think, in general, the platform provides for them something to work with.
But that wasn't what I asked. I was asking what you're hoping that the induction will achieve when it's over.
Well, the induction can only achieve good governance. And because of the kind of personalities that we are asking to come and speak to them, I think the takeaway is that, there are other ways of doing things than what I had conceived or what I had preconceived would be, my agenda. And I would still rely on the choice of people. People that I know have, remarkable footsteps in different sectors of, running their own states. We have 2 governors from the United States of America, one from Maryland, another from Virginia. One was, renowned for improving healthcare facilities and, education, the other for security. And as a matter of fact, one of the key people we had invited who would not be able to come because of the stormy situation in his, city, that's New York City, the mayor of New York, who was first time a black man has been a mayor, and who has records of even digitalizing, crime fighting in New York City. And we had thought that by him coming to speak to governors, that would be, as a matter of fact, we had arranged that he would also meet, someone who is not the governor, the, minister of the FCT, which would have opened up, the conversation around how to digitally fight crime in this country. And, well, thankfully, he's going to, be with us virtually, which would also help embellish, the induction. But I believe strongly that the induction is necessary. It's a very big event for the NGF. It's also a very big event for anybody coming into governance, because you listen to, very, very serious and achieving people. And for all I care, when you look at it, the benefits are enormous for governors.
Mr. Barkindo.
Yes, sir.
We're winding down. And if you have a word of advice for the Nigerian citizens who are living in these different states, you who's having to more like curate the affairs of the governors, their #1 citizens, what would you be telling them, especially as some of these states, 18 states, will receive new governors and probably would have met a couple of either pitfalls or bumps on the way, waiting for them in the office? What would you be telling the citizens in those states?
I would borrow from Austin, who just left the studio. Keep the people involved. That's the most important thing. If the people are involved, you will get serious feedbacks, not from lackeys and hangers-on, but from the society itself. Because if you go to advanced countries, you share a bus with probably the governor of a state or the mayor of a city and things like that. And there are direct contacts. You can see people who need your services, and you can see that, what your friends have been telling you behind those closed curtains do not reflect the situation on ground. So if you keep the people involved, you'll know where to go.
Thank you so much. We've been speaking with Abdul Razak Bello Barkindo, Head Media and Public Affairs Nigeria Governors Forum Secretariat. Thank you for coming in this morning.
Thanks for having me.
And that's the show. But just before we let you go have the rest of your day and hopefully a good weekend, your meals.
Yes, indeed. We have some feedback. Kenneth sent us an email. He's talking about leadership and governance. It says effective leadership and governance in a rapidly changing global environment are more important than ever. And leaders face extraordinary pressures to mobilize the organizations to adapt to these changes and rapidly innovate. Using our expertise in adaptive leadership, I support teams and individuals in leadership roles to maximize their effectiveness. So he also says, I support the development of executive teams and boards so that they're poised to move away from the status quo to manage conflict and complexity. So quite, in case you're looking for more services, I guess that's what Kenneth is talking about. But certainly, it needs to be focused on leadership and governance.
And indeed, the complexities of leadership and governance. But here's this one. Law Alpha Cross says, the craze to occupy a principal position in the 10th Assembly is becoming unhealthy and unkept. A lawmaker could still be relevant in view of their contributions on the floor of the House. The scenario looks more of individual political aggrandizement than national considerations. That's coming from Law Alpha Cross.
The craze is unkempt. Interesting words there. This one is from Samson, I believe. And he says, Nigeria has the highest crude oil reserve aside Libya, with over 36 billion barrels reserve. What we need is to improve the capacity to produce more. We seldom even meet up with production quota allocated to us by OPEC. And in addition to that, make an example of economic saboteurs, Ayo.
Professor Enakana says in a tweet, no country plunges the resources of redevelopment of her country into fuel subsidy. If there's judicious application of the country resources, have workable infrastructure and refineries, cut our jumbo recurrent expenditure, create enabling environment for the successful economic development, cut interest rates to single digit, then there will be hope of national integration and prosperity.
And so that's it. Thank you for the thoughts, the comments, and all that they had to send in. We really do appreciate them, and we hope that you've had a fantastic week with us. Thank you so much for letting us be a part of your day today. Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, and Monday, right? I'm almost sounding like Gaia. Well, thank you so much, and do remember that you are the change that you desire to see around you. I'm Neo Taigwe. Bye-bye.
Thank you for what? Yes, don't let people... Don't let that statement, reign, in controversy. But let's leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Malpo Yusuf.
Yes, thank you. It's been a beautiful count, from the beginning of the week. Let's do this again next week. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Koka.
And please make the best of your life. The rest of it, I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful rest of your day and weekend.
Ranking, and they don't call me world best for no reason. I only deal with the best, be it auto or business. 100% claim is always guaranteed.
Welcome to world-class insurance services. We are Anchor Insurance.
We are insurance.